turning off my video.
Okay.
Yeah. So hi everyone.
Do
This
you
is
want to share the
oh,
text?
three. Yep.
Okay.
So hi everyone. It's me and Nelson back again. Today we are covering chapters 23 and 24. The book is still Eloquent Ruby. So let's try we had an introduction, or we covered two use cases for method missing, which is part of the meta programming section of the book. And chapters 23 and 24 build upon those last chapters, specifically chapters 21 and 22. And they give us two more use cases for method missing. Specifically for chapter 23, we'll be using method missing to build flexible APIs. And then for chapter 24, we'll use method missing to update existing classes. No, sorry. I think we'll just be looking at updating existing classes with monkey patching. So chapter 23, I'm going to reference the code on page 286. So remember, we have the document class. We've all this time throughout the book, we've been dealing with the document class. And for chapter 23, the problem we are trying to solve is that we have a specific kind of document, which is a form letter. And when you look at a form letter, it's kind of a generic document that you send to someone's email. So in this document, you're trying to tell them about something, but given that we start out with a generic document and we have generic terms, we don't know who the form letter is addressed to. For example, instead of saying the generic document might have sir or madam or a given gender, which is also a generic gender, amongst other things. And what we're trying to do inside this form letter class, which is the code on page 286, we are trying to get the generic word out of that template of the form letter, and we replace it with a new word. So we have a replace word method, and this method takes an old word. Let's say in our document, we have in our form letter template document, we have a word, for example, let's say dear sir. So instead of dear sir, to make it more personalized, we want to replace the word sir with the name of the person who owns the email we are sending this form letter document to. And now let's say if you're sending to my email, we'll be replacing the word dear sir to dear Newton. So going by that line of thinking, the old word will be sir, and then the new word will be Newton, which is of course the name of the person you're addressing it to. And then we use the gsub method with the exclamation mark at the end to signify that this is a permanent operation, and we proceed to do that replacement. Now, we are posed with this code, the following code, still on the same page. We create a new instance of the form letter class. Remember, the arguments are still the same because form letter is just a specific kind of document. The form letter class inherits from document. So here we create a new instance of the form letter class, and we pass in special offer Acme Incorporated, and we pass in the content, in which case this reads, dear Mr. Last Name, are you troubled with the heartache of hangnails? First name, we look forward to hearing from you. And now we call the replace word method on this instance of the form letter class, which is named offer letter, and we are trying to replace the last name and the first name. So for the first name, we replace the word first name inside the form letter template with the first name of the person we are addressing this to. In this case, this is the author's first name, which is Russ. And then we also replace the last name which is also part of the generic template form letter, and we replace it with Olsen. So what we're trying to do here is that we are trying to make this specific form letter more customized for the person we are addressing it to. And then proceeding on to page 287. Now we are faced with a situation whereby if we want to have these methods to be more customized, specifically we want to have a method that replaces the first name, and then we also want to have a method that replaces the last name. We add these methods to the form letter class, and inside the replace first name method we pass in the new first name, and then we call the replace word method, which we defined above. Same goes for the replace last name. Now here comes the trouble. We have a situation whereby we are dealing with a generic form letter template document. And this document has so many generic things that we will need to replace with the details of the person we are addressing this letter to. What do I mean by that? In this form letter document, we could have the gender of the person we are addressing it to. So instead of saying sir or madam, we'll have to replace that as well. Same goes for something like, let's say, the street number, the street name, the city, the state, the country, the zip code, occupation, the age, and so on. So we find ourselves in a situation whereby for each of these replacements, we have to write a method tailored to that specific thing we are trying to replace. And if we are trying to do all these replacements inside the form letter class, we'll have to write methods for each of them. And this is going to make the form letter class like very lengthy. For example, if you try to do counting, you're doing a replacement for the first name, so that's one replacement. Two for the last name, three for the street number, four for the street name, five for the city, and so on. So you find yourself in a situation whereby you have methods that are starting with the replace keyword, and you have like 10 of them, which is like a whole lot. And now this is where method missing comes in. So usually I'm going to try to reference the code on page 288. So how are we going to use method missing to solve this problem? Usually when you call a method on an object and that method is not defined for that object, the Ruby is going to return an error, and that error is produced by the method missing method, which is available for all objects. And what method missing tells you is simply that you've called a method, but this method is not available for this specific object. So you can't use the method. Inside the form letter class, we use method missing to solve our problem by overriding method missing. And what do I mean by overriding? We create a new method missing method inside our form letter class. And when we try to call a method that is not defined on a form letter instance object, this method missing that the method missing method we've defined inside the form letter class will be called instead of the method missing that is defined for most objects in Ruby. And now let me give an example. Let's say we have still I'm going to reference the paragraph that follows the code on page 288. We create a new instance of the form letter class and we call a method called replace gender on that specific instance object. And inside replace gender, the replace gender method, we pass in two arguments. One of them is the gender, which is the generic word we are trying to replace, and then we pass in dude as the second argument. So how is method missing going to help us to handle this? First and foremost, we are getting our method missing method has two parameters. One is the name of the method that we are dealing with. In this specific case, it's the replace gender method. Two, the arguments that were passed to that method. So here we're trying to say something that string underscore name is equal to the name, and then we basically what this line is doing, this line is we are turning the name of the method to a string. And then we check if the string name starts with the word replace underscore, we are going to proceed with the code that follows. If that's not the case, we are going to return to super. And what that means is that we'll delegate this operation to the method missing that is defined for all objects. So here we are converting the name. You convert the name of the method you're dealing with, in this case, replace gender, to a string. We check, is the string name in the format of replace underscore? Because remember, we are trying to deal with methods that replace generic things with more personalized things. So after that, let's say in our case, the replace gender method, of course, matches that format. And I think this is a regex pattern. So we get the old word. Because remember, our replace word method takes two arguments, the old word and then the new word. So we get the old word, and then we use the old word by passing it in as the first argument of the replace word method, which is defined above. In addition to this, we also pass in the first argument that was passed to the method we are dealing with, and this is how basically the replacement happens, I think. Nelson?
Yeah. No, you're right. Yeah, I mean, you're just going to reuse the class that's already been defined, replace word.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're just going to use those two arguments. The name of the method is becomes the extracted old word that you're gonna replace, and then you pass it the new arguments.
Yeah. So basically, that allows us to call any method on a form letter object that starts with the word replace and then an underscore. So we can replace the gender, we can replace the first name, we can replace the last name, and not have to define all these replace methods inside the form letter class. And that is the convenience method missing gives us. And with the use of method missing, we see that we don't have to define all those methods, and therefore the code is probably cleaner and more maintainable. So at the end of this page, I'm going to read, this variation on method missing is sometimes called magic methods. Since users of the class can make up method names, and as long as the names comply with the rules coded into method missing, the methods will just magically work. What do we mean by the rules coded into method missing? Inside method missing, we are only calling this specific method missing that is defined inside the form letter class for method names that start with replace underscore. So if you called a method on a form letter instance object and it doesn't start with replace underscore, that operation is going to be delegated to the method missing that is defined for Ruby objects, which is going to return an error telling you that that method is not defined for that object. But if you've called a method on a form letter instance object that starts with the replace underscore format, then you'll get this convenience. And that is what the author is trying to mean here. Regarding the magic methods, this highlighted, this word in this phrase in bold, it basically means that the methods are not there when you check the form letter class. They're not defined inside the form letter class. But if now let's say a programmer was to call that specific method on a form letter instance object, the object would respond to the method call, despite the fact that we didn't hard code those specific methods inside the form letter class. So that is what the magic methods means. And then this section of it's the users that count, all of them. What the key takeaway here is that why are you using method missing? It's simply because you want to make it easier for the people that are using this program. In this case, the people that are doing the sending of the form letters. You're making it easier for them to work with a generic template of a form letter and fill in or replace the things that are generic, for example, the gender, the first name, the last name, and they replace those specific words with more personalized, let's say, first names, last name, ages, depending on who they are sending the form letter to. And that is the key takeaway point from this section. So, staying out of trouble. One nice thing about using method missing to build a flexible API as opposed to using it for delegation is that there is much less danger of a made up method name colliding with a real method on the object. After all, you are making up the naming convention so you can avoid any obvious name conflicts. You do have to be on your guard, however, because unfortunate naming collisions can still slip in. For example, in our method missing pod form letter class, we cannot replace the word in capital in our document. If we try to do this, we create a new instance of the form letter class and we call it letter. And then we call replace word method on letter, passing in abracadabra as the word. So what is going to happen here? We are going to get an error, argument error, wrong number of arguments, 1 for 2. And why do we get this error? When we're trying to do this replacement, the method that we end up calling this first method this first method instead of method missing. And that is why you see that you're getting an error telling you that you passed in one argument, yet two arguments were required. Because the replace word method that has ended up being called takes two arguments, of which one is the old word and the next argument or the second argument is the new word. So in that case, method missing is not called, but rather the actual replace word method that we defined in the form letter class ends up being called. And that is why you run into the error on page 290. Argument error, wrong number of arguments, 1 for 2. And then the author presents a solution. The solution here is pretty easy. Simply rename the real method or devise a different naming convention for the magic methods. The deeper lesson is that you need to watch out for this sort of thing. And I think that's pretty self-explanatory. And then we look at the case of the respond to method. So every object you can use the respond to with the question mark method to check if a given object responds to a given method. In our case, we can check if for some methods that were defined inside the document class, if we have an instance of the document class, we can call respond to and then we pass in the method name to check if any of those objects respond to those given methods, of which they should because they're defined in the mother class. So what are we trying to see here? You also need to be aware of the likelihood that using method missing will mark up the respond to method. Every object instance includes a method called respond to, which should return to true if the object in question has a particular method, usually inside the class or in a module that's mixed into the mother class of that specific object. For example, if doc is an instance of document, then doc.respond to words will return true, while doc.respond to abuse will return false. This words method that we are checking for here is defined inside the document class. And since doc is an instance of document, doc.respond to words will return to true. And now for the case of abuse is not defined inside the document class, so you'll end up with false. The problem is that the default implementation of respond to only knows about the real methods. It has no way of knowing that you have slapped a method missing on your class that will allow instances to cheerfully handle dot replace gender. Depending on how elaborate your method missing implementation is, you may be able to fix respond to. So the code, specifically this respond to method, because now we've overridden the respond to method. Now we are making it do what we want. Let's say we were trying to check if an instance of the form letter class responds to a method, for example, replace gender. Without overriding the respond to method, we are going to see that our output is going to be false, simply because the replace gender is not hard coded inside the form letter class, but rather is that operation is dealt with by the method missing, which makes sense. So inside this code, we see that we get the name of the method that we are dealing with, we turn it into a string, and then we tell respond to return true if the string name starts with the keyword replace underscore. And what we are trying to do here is that if we were to call respond to and pass in a method, for example, replace gender, we would have the output as true instead of false. And that is still a way of overriding the respond to method that is available for all objects. So in the wild, this
Sorry.
section,
Let me just say one thing about this staying out of trouble section.
okay,
The first part they discuss name collisions and how you have to watch out for other people
yeah,
who are or other areas of the code that are might end up colliding with the names that you've set up. But then I think the more important thing is watching out for this respond to method because it's very, very easy to forget to override the respond to method. And you might not even know about it if you didn't read this book. And even then, uh, 3 months from now, I might forget. Luckily, I'm running a linter, RuboCop, that when I did override method missing, it reminded me to do the respond to. So if you're using some sort of editor, you should also be running a linter that reminds you of these kinds of things.
okay. And I think we should proceed to in the wild.
Hmm.
Yeah. So one of the I want to say that the repositories where we'll find this kind of magic method missing technique being used is the Ruby standard class OpenStruct. And referencing the code on page 291, we require the class, and then we create a new OpenStruct object. So we specify the first name, the first name of the author to be Stephen, and the last name to be Hawking. Of course, this is Stephen Hawking. And then we can check for what the first name of the author is along with what the last name by calling the first name method on the author. So now we look at the actual implementation, which is still just a bit below. So we have a method missing, and what we are saying here is that we have an if statement inside this method missing. So what are we trying to check for? We are trying to check if the method name, in this specific case, the method we are dealing with, if the method name ends with an equals, then the caller is trying to set a new value on the OpenStruct instance. In this case, an example of that would be this thing of saying author dot first name is equal to Stephen. So this is a setting operation. We are trying to set the first name of the author to be Stephen and the last name of the author to be Hawking. Yeah. And this is what the very first if part of the if statement checks for. We're checking for if m name is equal to, it ends with an equals, then we know that that is a setting operation. And then what else do we check for? We are trying to see If it's not ending in an equals operation, then that means it's an operation that involves retrieving. So in that case, we'll just be calling. An example of it would be calling the first name method on the author to get the first name returned to us, same as calling the last name method on the author to have still returned to us. Then we also have the last part of the if statement, which is going to raise an undefined or no method error. In this specific case, if we are not trying to do a setting operation or a retrieving operation, then we are going to run into a no method error, which is what this else, which the last part of the if statement handles, specifically this else. And I think another part is active record, where you can see this method missing. And what this basically means is that you have an author has a first name and the last name. So you can just, if you want to find the first name of the author, you can call the find by, instead of calling just find by, you can say find by underscore f name or find by underscore l name to get the first name and the last name respectively. Or you can even combine these. You say find by f name underscore and last name, and this is all made possible by method missing. So that is pretty much about chapter 23. I think we'll proceed to chapter 24. Nelson, I don't know if you can help me out with this. You usually reference monkey patching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So with monkey patching, what the can you scroll down a little bit to the section where he's calling wide open classes?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
he's making an analogy here where he starts out with a variable. The variable is named Isaac, and then he set or well the variable name is name, and the contents of that variable is going to contain Isaac. But what he's
Yeah.
saying here is that if the variable doesn't already exist, this creates the variable and it sets it to whatever you initialize it to. In the same way that variables can be created on the fly like this and modified on the fly like this. Um, I will share my screen too.
Hello.
Yeah, so you should be seeing my screen now.
Yeah. Sorry, that was a network issue.
Okay,
Oh,
so in the same way that you can modify variables on the fly by just, a second instance of the variable name, the equal sign, you set it to Asimov. Now you've modified that variable name. In the same way, you can define a class in one part of your code and then define the class again in the second part of your code, and it's going to modify that class. And the modifications are additive. So the first time that we've defined this class document, we set an initializer. We've set this accessor for title, author, and content. So those things stay as they are. And then the second declaration of this class document here adds methods. And so these methods get added to what already exists in the first declaration. Obviously, if you add a method with the same name, it's going to go override the the uh, the first instance of the declaration. So it'll only use the last instance of the method declaration. But ultimately, it's going to look at both and construct a class with everything that it finds in either one of those class declarations. Um, so you're not defining a new class, you're modifying the existing document class. So that's what's
Yeah.
going on. Um, and then you could even do it a third time. Here we're adding average word length. So why would we do this? There are a few reasons why we would do this. Um, One is to like modify code that we didn't write, so or in this case here, he's saying we're fixing a broken class because uh, we're doing this division. This division can break, and it can break when word size is zero because uh, we're doing a division by zero results in something that is an error called not a number. Um, yeah, so if you run the code, you'll see not a number. So what do we do to fix it? We're going to open up the document class again. We're going to redefine average word length, and then we're going to return zero if word length is zero. And then we're going to do the averaging as necessary. So if we didn't have control of the original code, well, it doesn't matter because we can just open up that document class, fix the error on our side by overriding the average word length method, and we're good to go. Okay. Um, you can improve existing classes. So if we want to be able to add a string plus a document class, because a string doesn't know how to add itself to the document class. Like there's nothing in string that knows about our code. So what can
Yeah.
we do? We can say, okay, well, I'm going to tell you about my code. We're going to open up the string class. We're going to redefine the plus operator, the plus method here. And then if the other thing that we're adding to is a document, then what we're going to do is the code in here to make sure that we add the content of that document to this string and then produce a new document. Otherwise, we're going to do the regular plus uh, operations to produce string plus string a result. Okay. Um, right. So I'm probably going to come back to this implementation, but we're going to skip ahead for now
Okay.
because there is something nagging me about this code, but we'll talk about it a little later. Okay. So renaming methods with alias method. The other thing that we can do is okay, so he says it here. One downside to our string modification is that we end up reproducing the guts of the original string plus method, the boring non-document bit that creates a bigger string from two smaller strings. So what we can do in if we choose to, is alias methods, which means just give that method a different name. So here, when we declare alias method number of words to word count, so we're creating this new method name called number of words, and we're going to bind it to whatever word count does. So whatever this method does, number of words is going to do the same thing. And we're also going to alias it to alias word count to size in words. So word count, number of words, size of words, they all do the same thing. Um, this you can see this in array methods as well, where array methods have a a method called reduce, but reduce is also an alias for inject. Um, yeah, so various places where alias method already exists and is used. when here's our version of the monkey patched string method. So we can alias the old method uh, and bind it to the plus operation. So here we can update. Uh, so we can add in our the code that we want. So if we're adding a string plus a document, this is what the content in here in this if statement is what's going to get run. Otherwise, we're going to do the same old uh, plus method that string already has on it. And we can do that because we've aliased the method and that alias binds to the original uh, plus operation. Um, but it also means you have to take into account this behavior whenever you're overriding methods. Um,
Yeah.
because this is not an obvious thing. You might think, oh, we're just gonna add an alias, and the alias is gonna be to this plus method, without realizing, oh no no no, it's not to the plus method that I've redefined here. It's to the original plus method that can be found in the string class. Okay, so do anything to any class anytime. Um, I'm gonna have to remind myself what this section is about. So we have okay. Yeah, so we can make the word count method private. We can redeclare the document class and make word count public. We can even get rid of it altogether. So we can remove the method. We can redeclare the document class and remove the method word count. So in other languages like Java or uh, languages that have this concept of public and private, they enforce security so that if you do make the method private, it means that no other subclass or in no other part of the code can you make changes, and it's always you can count on that method always being private. In Ruby, you don't have the same sort of security. If you know that about a private method, you can just go ahead and make it public and use it as such, which is
Hey,
a different experience. Yeah.
so Nelson, we have 30 seconds. Should we create a new meeting and we
Um,
continue?
yeah, sure. We'll use the other
Okay.
one.
Okay.
Oh, you know what?